Hello, Environmental Policy 1 students. Dr. Conway here. Just wanted to send you a brief video on your first short paper for the term, which is in week 5. I've emailed you and I put it in announcements what the topic is. What I want you to do is adopt this assignment as if you're working for a consulting enterprise and you're been asked by a foreign client to brief them on one of the 3 acts that I set out in my email and my announcement. One is that the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, the other is the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act, and the Ontario Environmental Protection Act. Either one of those acts, you choose one and you provide a briefing note summary for a hypothetical foreign client who wishes to try to understand a little bit better what these acts enable, what their purpose and objective is, what their scope and coverage is, key legal principles used, etc., as per the list that I provided in the email. So I've also sent forward a couple of examples or guidance documents on preparing briefing notes. So I want you to follow those really closely as well. Particularly the one from the Government of Canada, the one with the yellow cover, is a very good guidance document for briefing notes, but the other one is also quite useful. Now, keep in mind that when you're writing briefing notes, you should be using Grammarly Premium. Don't submit a paper to me where you have not used Grammarly Premium and you've edited it thoroughly, okay? I recognize that many of you may not be used to writing in English language, even though you obviously speak English. The writing skills is it's a different game. So a few things that I want you to keep in mind. First is write in short paragraphs. Don't write in long paragraphs. Do not make your reader, your client in this case, look through paragraphs to find out what the key messages are. Those messages should be jumping out at the reader. That means you should be writing in short, tight paragraphs, short, tight sentences. Paragraphs should be one sort of topic area and not rambling on. At a logical place to break the paragraph into something smaller, do so. Sentences should not be run on. They should be really tight, punchy sentences and not run on sentences, okay? The other key thing to remember is do use the headings that I've sent you in the briefing note guidance documents, but under those headings, there are subheadings that you can use to help the reader follow along in the messages you're trying to say. For example, you might get under the section of the general section of the briefing note, you might have a subheading on key principles of the legislation, and you just summarize that, okay? And the same thing goes to when you get down to delegated authorities under the law. It might be a subheading and then maybe just one short paragraph. The Canadian Environmental Protection Act, the Ministers of the Environment and Health are both responsible for the Canadian Environmental Protection Act and its implementation, because the CEPA is a government-wide piece of legislation, not a departmental piece of legislation. And so, you know, make it really organized. The other thing that you should not be doing in your briefing notes is cutting and pasting from the Act. You're the expert, so you should be summarizing the Act for the client. And the other thing to keep in mind is do not use long bulleted text. No client wants to read bulleted text, okay? So in some cases, bullets are fine, okay? For example, if you were talking about the principles of the Act, you might say that this Act primarily relies on 6 or 7 principles, whatever the case may be, that are well known in environmental pieces of legislation. And then you might put that as a colon and then go down into bulleted text that just explains what is precaution, what is pollution prevention, what is whatever the principles are that you're talking about. And those bullets may be a couple of sentences, just to say the precautionary principle as adopted in Rio, blah, 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 says the following thing, and CEPA adopts this principle with some modifications, and then explain the modifications, or whatever the case may be that you're talking about, okay? So that's very important as well. In this briefing note, you're not providing recommendations. So you'll notice in the 2 guidance documents I sent you, they make a distinction between briefing notes that are purely informational and briefing notes that are more analytical and provide recommendations. So your briefing note this time around is informational, and you should be providing very solid summary information to a person who may know nothing about Canadian Environmental Protection Act or Ontario Environmental Protection Act or CELA or whatever. So so keep in mind that you need to think about it in terms of being in the shoes of the briefing note consumer or user. So keep that in mind. So the exercise is more than just reading the act and just dropping stuff in. The exercise is, how am I going to summarize this act so that the foreign client truly understands what its original purpose is, what it contains, and basically how it functions. Okay? And so it's purely an informational note. So I do not need a section in the back on recommendations. Okay? But the other sections noted in the briefing doc guide, the guidance documents on briefing notes, yes, and then subheadings under those that help the reader follow along. Think about subheadings, headings and subheadings as being the reader's map, travel map from point A to point B. What you're trying to do is give them a very good feeling for the note in one glance by even looking at the headings and subheadings. And then a busy reader can delve more deeply into subsections that they find most interesting. Okay, so you got the guidance. It's a 4 pages maximum, 12-point Arial font. Okay, I want 1.2 line spacing, not every second line, not 1.5, but give me 1.2. Okay, now I say a maximum. You notice the word maximum of 4 pages. All right, so that means if you think you can summarize, do a very good summary of the act in 3 pages, even, you know, whatever. The measure of the exercise is how well you've summarized the act for a foreign client in a briefing note format, not the length. Okay, the length is just something where we set parameters for maximum, but shorter notes can get A's and A pluses. It just depends upon how good a writer you are, how much time you think about the act, how well you plan the structure of your briefing note. So on that score, make sure that you bullet out what you want to say in your briefing note. Just write it down, bullet it out before you put it into your text. So, and then organize the bullets into headings and subheadings. Get everything organized so that all you have to do when you start writing is turn the bullets into text, into short paragraphs, punchy sentences, and good quality information in a qualitative format, a narrative format. Okay? So also keep that in mind when you're writing your briefing note. All right. So good luck with this first written project. Now, you know, in the area of the environment, if you want to be successful in this area, in fact, in any areas, you have to learn how to analyze these things, and you have to learn how to write clearly. It can be tough. The first note, second note. By the second term, you'll be much stronger at it. This one will be difficult. But work at it and try your best. And I take improvement from one briefing note to the next, through this term, the next term, seriously into account. If I see a lot of improvement, your grades are going to reflect that, okay? But put the effort into this first briefing note, all right? And give it a good shot. The way to tackle it is, don't even open Word initially, okay? Just open up Grammarly and write your drafts in Grammarly, and then cut and paste them into Word for final formatting, okay? So, read the act, think about it, bullet it out, the key messages, bullet it out that respond to my list that I gave you in the initial email, which is purpose and objectives, all the way down to appeal processes under enforcement acts. Get the key answers, bullet them out under each of those, and then organize them into subheadings. Now, each of those things on the list will not necessarily warrant a subheading, okay? But you need to be able to determine which are the most important items that warrant a subheading, and then subsume some of the other items that don't warrant a subheading underneath another subheading, okay? So good luck with this. I know you can do well. I know the first one is always difficult if you're not used to writing briefing notes, but believe me, by the time we get to the end of the second term, your writing skills will be significantly improved if you stay at it, okay? And that's going to be very, very key to your future job prospects, all right? So good luck with this, and I'll talk to you again later. Bye-bye now.